All right, we're finally at the end of all these reviews, and we're going to end it with Far From Home, which is a special Spider Man movie just because it's the one that follows directly after Endgame. It's the first movie after Endgame, and even though it's a Spider Man movie, obviously it kind of has to address the fact that it's after one of the biggest movies in superhero history, cinema history. Like, it's one of the biggest movies ever, so it kind of has to address that. So you kind of got to add that on top of the fact that it is another Spider-Man movie. You can't really ignore that. So how does the movie handle such a fat burden? Well, with humor, of course. It tries to fucking laugh it off. And I sound mad, but I'm really not, honestly. I think the movie's funnier than the first one, and I think humor is a good way to kind of handle the how heavy Endgame was, because god damn, that's a heavy ass movie, bro. There's a lot of deep shit in that movie. It takes itself seriously, but never too seriously to the point where it's like bogging down your mood. But that is a pretty heavy movie. So Far From Home, to contrast that, is pretty funny, although it does have its fair share of heavy themes, but we'll get to that later. While the humor might turn some people off, I enjoyed it. I think it's a hard task to come after Endgame, and some humor after so much darkness, in my opinion, that's a good move. And on top of that, the MCU once again does something different with Spider-Man. They take him out of New York, which no other movie has done so far. It really didn't have to be overseas either, because they go to Europe. It could have been anywhere, as long as you take him out of like a cityscape. You know, just taking a character like Spider-Man that's kind of connected to his environment through his traversal technique, you know, the webs and all that, and then putting him in an unfamiliar place, it's already super interesting, because then he has to figure out how to move around without the usual kind of terrain that he's used to. And anything else other than that is just extra on top, and I enjoy it very much so. And the shift is also nice because it goes hand in hand with Peter's transition from like a local superstar to like a worldwide superstar. Basically, before, nobody knew in Homecoming, nobody knew who Spider-Man was, or people didn't care who Spider-Man was. They might have knew who he was, they didn't care about him. Now they're asking him if he's gonna be the next leader of the Avengers. Like, there's a clear shift in between Homecoming and Far From Home. Obviously, there's a bunch of movies that happen in between, but there's a clear shift in importance of the character of Spider-Man. And to contrast that, Peter considers himself less important in Far From Home than he does in Homecoming. It's like the extra pressure added on top of that. He's kind of crumbling under it. And it is interesting, and it does make sense. He is a kid, after all. But, of course, you can't talk about this movie without addressing the elephant in the room, which is the scene where Peter gives Edith the Mysterio. Now, I know people have their very harsh criticisms with this whole scene, and as a result with the whole movie, because the whole movie kind of devolves out of that one scene. Listen, I'm not here to back this decision as the thing that makes the most sense ever, because it doesn't. He should have just gave the glasses back to Happy, or something. Anybody, really. I don't know. Anyone other than a dude he just met. But Peter truly believed that Mysterio was a good guy, and not only a good guy, he thought that he was maybe like a possible successor to Iron Man, who you can argue was a parental figure to Peter. If you were in Spider-Man's shoes and you truly believed that there was someone out there worthy of receiving the last gift, the last memento that your mentor left behind for you, wouldn't you want to give it to them? Especially if you felt like you weren't even worthy of this gift? I understand where Peter's coming from with this decision. He had massive doubts since the beginning of the movie, that is very clear, about his role in like the superhero community, about his role in the Avengers, about his importance within the superhero community. He doesn't want to be this big time guy that he wanted to be in Homecoming. He doesn't have these superhero dreams anymore after he's seen what happened in Endgame. So it does make a lot of sense that he would want to distance himself from that. And as a result, he would give Iron Man's gift to him to someone who he thinks is a better person. In the movie also, they say to the next Iron Man. They also make it a point in the movie to say that Spider-Man isn't the next Iron Man, and even way after Edith is given to Mysterio, even when Peter's trying to get the glasses back, he still says that he's not Iron Man. Happy also says you're never going to be Iron Man. Nobody could be Iron Man. And I think that's what's important. It's not only the fact that he's giving Edith to Mysterio, it's the fact that he's giving Iron Man's gift, who's supposed to be for the next Iron Man, to someone else who he thinks is more worthy of the title. Now, this isn't my personal opinion. I'm just saying that I understand why he did what he did, and that the decision wasn't done without any reason. Mysterio did go way out of his way to do this whole thing, this whole scheme. He went out of his way exactly just to get Edith. And speaking of Mysterio, I feel like he would have been a hard villain to pull off in live action for most people, but holy shit, did they do it well. Even if I knew before I even saw the movie that Mysterio was a villain, Jake Gyllenhaal is just so convincing, and I think he's just a really good casting choice. And if you don't believe me, well, the only proof you need is the scene where Peter gives Mysterio Edith. The sudden shift from composed to insane as like the illusion kind of gets cast away is wild. It is absolutely wild, and some of the best scenes in the entire movie have to do with Mysterio special effects. I'm thinking specifically of that middle scene where he's trying to get the information out of Peter while he's disguising himself as Nick Fury. Of course, though, there is the little problem that Mysterio and his team, they kind of started their whole scheme because of Tony Stark. Listen, at this point, I would understand being upset at this decision. In the first one, I could defend it. In this one, it's the second time that it's an Iron Man villain. You know the complaints about Homecoming, how he's had Iron Man Jr. Do you really want to do it again, especially with all the Iron Man focus in this game already because he just died? I don't know, but I would understand if being upset at this decision, but Peter is still his own man. He's still feeling the effects of Tony's decisions though, but it just works. It makes sense, man. Mysterio might be angry at Tony Stark, but he has to go through Peter to get what he wants, so that makes him a Spider-Man villain. I just don't personally think it's that big of a deal. It's not like it ruins the movie-going experience. But I would personally understand if somebody felt differently about it. I'm not here to tell you how to think. I understand why that would be divisive, although something that I don't understand why it would be divisive is Peter and MJ's relationship. They're just cute together, man. It's not as passionate as Andrew and Emma, but it's miles better than Toby and Kirsten, I'll give you that. And independently of both those relationships, if I didn't have to shit on them or praise them, it's just genuinely an enjoyable connection that they share. And we can also talk about the suits in this movie, since we're on the topic of enjoyable things. They're great, both of them. Both suits displayed in this movie are great. Although the Night Monkey suit is my favorite, maybe because it's the closest thing we'll get to a noir suit, or maybe because it just looks cool. But the red and black suit is good too. I just prefer the Homecoming suit. That's why I'm rating it lower than the Night Monkey suit in this movie. Although the red and black suit does get some extra points for being Peter's own creation. No matter what y'all think, he's the one that made it. Doesn't matter how he made it, he made it. So y'all could drop the Iron Man Jr. allegations. Overall, I love this movie. It's a very nice change of pace from the usual Spider-Man story, if only because it's told in a different location. That's really all I needed, just a different backdrop, and it's already instantly fresh. Mysterio is also such a good villain that every time you rewatch this movie, you'll feel the same hatred for him every single time. It literally never gets better, and that's the sign of a good villain, if you hate him every single time. I'm gonna give this movie a B+. It's not quite as good as Homecoming, but it's not nearly as bad as people say. This is a good movie, honestly, and I cannot wait to see the follow-up to it.